Hello and welcome to Topical Top Tens here on the Football 365 show. I'm your host, Mark Smith. I'm with Editor-in-Chief of Football365.com, Sarah Winterburn. Sarah, what is our top 10 this week, please?
This week, Mark, it's the top 10 out-of-work managers. They're all available, they're all ready.
All available already. We mentioned Leonardo Jardim at this point. I think it's at number 7, is he? We didn't mention his lovely vineyard. He's got a nice vineyard. Do you know that? I've seen it on Twitter.
I didn't know that, and that's another reason to bring him in.
Yeah, well, should we put him at number 1 and number 2, maybe? We can probably find
let's just redo the whole thing. Number 1.
Top 10 managers' vineyards. Right, enjoy the show. Okay, let's crack on with it. Plenty to talk about. So let's start with number 10, Laurent Blanc. Sarah, why is he number 10 on your list?
Well, he's in the list at all because he's out of work and available, which is part of the list. It's the charm of the list. He's down at number 10, probably a bit lower than some people would have him because it's been a while, hasn't it? And I think that sort of lends to that air of, is he any good? And obviously the last job was at PSG, where you kind of thought everybody should win quite a lot of things there. And he's failed to get past that last hurdle. But then everyone's failed to get past that last hurdle with PSG. So you wonder whether that's more about the club than the man. Apparently tactically not brilliant, which you might think might be a slight obstacle to management. But it's not in the Premier League these days now. No, go for it.
No, you just go for it. Just be a bit charismatic and go for it. And he definitely ticks that box. I mean, I could see him take any number of jobs here.
Yeah, he's got a bit of something about him, hasn't he?
Yeah, and he's
definitely French, which helps.
He's definitely French, and he's a big name both as a player in England for United for a brief period, but everyone knows who he is. And as we've seen, like you say, with the likes of Lampard and to a lesser extent Solskjaer, ex-players who are respected in their generation tend to get something out of their players. So who knows? Someone who definitely gets some sort of reaction from players, definitely gets a reaction from fans and pundits, is number 9, Sam Allardyce. Allardyce, I'm looking forward to what you say about this guy.
Well, if this was a list of managers who could come in to do a job in the Premier League, then he'd be number 1, wouldn't he? But because we looked across Europe, we're going number 9. But Sam Allardyce, I mean, what can you say? Any club that's I still think he's going to turn up at Aston Villa. I'm convinced he's going to turn up at Aston Villa.
Mid-season, you think?
Yeah, big club, kind of, a lot of pressure now on Dean Smith to kind of, because he spent all that money now on the striker. There's no excuses left now. He shouldn't be in a relegation battle again. They shouldn't have been in one last season after the sort of money they'd spent. They went and spent again, and they're probably going to spend more. I think there's massive pressure on him, and Allardyce is the perfect man because it's a big enough club, isn't it, to satisfy his ego?
Yeah, I think so. I think
what he did at Everton was overplayed. There wasn't. He was a firefighter who turned up to take rescue the cat from the tree.
Yeah,
there wasn't a great deal to do there. But some club in a slightly worse place, you'd love to see him back, wouldn't you? Just that.
I love Allardyce. He gets a lot of stick, and there's this sort of there's this idea which I think is completely false that he's some sort of dinosaur in terms of management. But you got to remember, he was at the cutting edge of technology when it came to football. As far as I know, he was the first player ever here to be using things like Prozone and tracking stats on players. You look at when he's up in the stand with his ear.
People confuse dinosaur with pragmatism, and he's a massively pragmatic manager, isn't he? He will do what is required to get the job done. Now, he would argue he'd play better football at a bigger club. We've not seen any evidence of that whatsoever when he has been.
I would argue against that.
I would argue against that. Not to his face, because he's quite a large man.
He's a big bloke, Big bloke, and also, from personal experience, a very lovely man, I must say. Yeah, genuinely. Right, number 8. Leonardo Jardim. Why is Jardim in here?
Well, he built that extraordinary Monaco side, didn't he? And winning the French league in this era of PSG money has to be worth something, doesn't it? And I know he went back and it didn't go quite so well, but he was at the helm of that great Monaco side that came through and reached. Were absolutely thrilling, weren't they, when they reached the semi-finals of the Champions League, won the Ligue 1. And before that, he did win titles in Greece. So it's not like he just came and appeared and disappeared again. I think probably in hindsight, he made a mistake going back after Thierry Henry. The club's obviously in a very different state to the one he left. Monaco's the way that Monaco have played over the last few years in terms of, I don't mean played, I mean as in operated their business in the last few years in terms of buying players young and then selling them on and stuff. Obviously that cracked after a while because it generally only lasts so long that, before other clubs take you to the cleanest with those players as well because they know you've got money. So it'll only last so long.
Yeah. Did he bring through that batch of players at Monaco, Fabinho and Mbappe? Was he the player that gave them minutes?
He was the man who was kind of at the forefront of that. And obviously the first signs of Kylian Mbappe were under Leonardo Jardim. Obviously, anyone who saw Kylian Mbappe in training would know what they got in their hands, you'd expect. But he harnessed that side, and they were brilliant for a time, weren't they? And obviously they've lost their way again now. And like I said, going back was probably a mistake, and may well have sort of cost him a bigger job elsewhere.
Yeah,
but I'd still quite like to see him. I think that was an exhilarating side. So he points to sort of an expansive kind of football we'd like to see somewhere else, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I'm still sort of reeling from the way you pronounced Mbappe, but we'll move on to number 7, Marcelino.
What did I just say? Did I say Mbappe?
Mbappe. That's okay. You say Mbappe. You're Northern, Bap, Cobb, whatever.
Fabian Cobb. Kylian Cobb. Why would I just call him Fabian? What madness.
Number 7, we've got Marcelino.
Yeah, Marcelino. I would love to see him in the Premier League, actually. Play some, again, slightly pragmatic football sometimes at times, but... did wonderful things at Villarreal and then at Valencia to take Valencia to consecutive 4th places. When we've seen the mess that Valencia have been under other managers,
so sad to see at the minute, isn't it?
They're a car crash of a club, and they have been through. I think it's 427 managers in 10 years or something. I mean,
something like that. Yeah,
something like that. But Marcelino was so far away the pick of the bunch, and he's a man who's not averse to a 4-4-2. So we'd like to see him here. West Ham, I'm thinking. David Moyes.
Yep.
Off you go.
Let's have it. Let's have Marcelino there. I wouldn't mind that.
Yeah, bring it on.
All right, move on to number 6. Then we've got Luciano Spalletti.
Spalletti, a curious character, bit of an angry young man, which is
very
probably not you. Yeah, quite explosive. But who doesn't mind an explosion? I mean, come on, bring it on.
Absolutely. Again, West Ham could be the place for him at the moment.
Again, I think we should just like every one of them. You kind of want to go. Where would you fancy seeing them? West Ham.
Should this be the top 10 managers that should be at West Ham? Is that what this list should be, really?
It really should be. If only sort of 7 or 8 of them wouldn't go anywhere near. And Allardyce might be above.
Yeah, maybe.
Where could you see? Great fit.
Let's assume West Ham out of the equation. Where could you see someone like Spalletti?
I don't want to see that. I mean, it's difficult to see him sort of. I don't know, because you're sort of mid-tier, aren't you? But we've got a funny Premier League at the moment where sort of most of the managers, barring David Moyes and probably Scott Parker, are absolutely nailed on in their jobs. And there is not a lot of wriggle room at the moment, is there? And but let's just say Chelsea, because he's Italian and they love an Italian manager. They love appointing an Italian manager and then sacking an Italian manager. So Spalletti could be the next one.
Well, perfect. Because
volatile, banging his head on the table during press conferences. Who doesn't want to see that? But he's built some great sides. That Roma side was brilliant. With the Njeko and Mo Salah.
Yeah,
and I'm sure he was brilliant at Zenit, where we were never watching him, but he won a load of titles.
Well, from one future Chelsea manager to a past one, number 5, we've got Maurizio Sarri.
That was a beautiful segue.
Thank you.
Yeah, much maligned. I think we've got to put before his name every time we say it. But
is that harsh?
I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it? Because it's one of those where people clearly don't warm to him. Whether it's the media, the players, the fans, they don't warm to him. That he's this kind of character is slightly removed from them, and it isn't incredibly. We keep wanting to say tactile. Then why would they want a manager who's tactile? That's a whole different show. But he can't argue with the fact he's got results, hasn't he? He turned Napoli into title contenders. They never quite reached, crossed that line, but he turned them into title contenders. Came to Chelsea, was loved and then hated as quickly as he was loved, and but still delivered.
Absolutely,
a trophy and Champions League football, which
top
was
4,
pretty much exactly his remit of what he was supposed to deliver with that squad. And then he's won the title at Juventus, which obviously you might.
Yes, but I feel like one of us could have won that.
I think you're overstating that a bit. I think it's not quite PSG, is it? It's not quite sort of you've been handed it before you get there. I think you have to be a half decent manager to win the Serie A with Juventus, and Sarri obviously did enough. Now, obviously, there are egos at stake in that club who wanted something different, and it's certainly telling that they've gone down the club legend route, isn't it? Because it's like, we didn't like this outsider, and I think wherever he goes, maybe he'll always be an outsider, and I think that is going to be an issue, isn't it? Wherever he goes, whether another Premier League club would take him, I'm not entirely sure. I don't even think West Ham would fancy it. I think because he's got this image, hasn't he, of this kind of odd man.
I think it's starting in football management so late doesn't help with that. I think people see him as an outsider, someone whose first career isn't football, and maybe that's some baggage that he carries with him. Let's move on then to number 4. We've got Ernesto Valverde.
We have. I mean, I think it's quite easy to put Valverde in a pile of sort of Barcelona failures, but he did actually win the title twice, which Barcelona would take in a heartbeat right now. I would have thought 2 in a row. Won a few titles in Greece as well. He's not just done it in Barcelona. I don't know. He's not one of those you think he's going to turn up in England, but I think he's probably harshly looked at in terms of what's happened at Barcelona. And now it's
hard to judge any Barcelona manager, isn't it?
Oh, almost impossible, because obviously you do well, everybody says it's Messi.
Yeah.
You do badly, it all falls on your shoulders.
Yes.
I mean, we see the mess of that club now, and the squad, what they've spent over the last few years on absolute nonsense players. I mean, it's just remarkable. I mean,
and that's very rarely the manager's choice over there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're not talking about David Moyes making a decision to bring in Jordan Hugill. You're talking about them being told what players they're going to get.
Yeah, you've got this new player, he's playing for you, and that's it.
Yeah, and like I said, I think Sid Lowe said that there's not one single transfer that you would consider to be a positive in the last 4 years, which would take you sort of almost back to Suarez times. It's to work with that and still win a couple of titles. I think that probably suggests he's not one of the shills that you get in there.
He's not a busted flush at all. Yeah.
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
No. Right, number 3, someone who I would dearly love to have back in the Premier League is Arsene Wenger.
I love him. I would have him at number 1 if he hadn't have been out of work for a while. I mean, I think that's the thing, isn't it? And also the idea that do we think he works anywhere outside Arsenal? Now, there's obviously questions about that, because otherwise, why isn't he being given a job? And he's not been shy about coming forward in terms of wanting jobs. He's obviously pitched himself for the Bayern job and various other jobs. And what he achieved at Arsenal, I mean, obviously there's a caveat of it going stale and sort of losing his way a little bit, but I can't, that's like a long marriage, isn't it? It has its ups and downs, and even a short marriage has its ups and downs.
Yep, even a short one.
Probably shorter if she ever watches this. But I love him. I think he's fantastic. All the stuff about him being fantastic for the English game, yeah, fair enough, but also just brilliantly interesting. Like, every press conference, he answered every question and answered it at length and honestly, and didn't mind talking about politics, didn't mind talking about issues at other clubs, just was open and intelligent. And that a very impressive bloke.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels the same way I felt about Roy Hodgson when he was England manager. Take away the football side of it, it just felt nice to have a manager who could do a press conference in Italian or in English, and it just felt like we had a rounded, worldly person in charge. There's an adult in the room, essentially. Number 2, Mauricio Pochettino.
Here we go, from a man who's won quite a lot to a man who's won bugger all. Obviously, Pochettino, you might say, why is he above Wenger? I think it's because it's more recent, and we've got more of an idea of him doing great things at more than one club as well, which obviously makes you think that his skills are transferable. And obviously, you don't underplay what happened at Spurs, and we've seen again this, the post-Poch Spurs doesn't look great, does it? And the team he built was incredibly dynamic, but also you kind of knew what they were trying to do, and you kind of you got it, and you kind of watched Tottenham, and you wanted to watch them, and they became for a while there one of the teams that the neutrals would tune in to see, because they did have that sort of verve about them. They were fast, they were furious, they kind of, and then he adapted it a little bit, and he wasn't afraid to go long. That, and the use of the fullbacks, probably before Liverpool used the fullbacks in such an obviously attacking way. All great to see, and obviously it did go it did go wrong at Spurs. It went wrong at Spurs long before,
But it didn't go disastrously wrong out in flames, did it?
I don't say it went out in flames, but I think a lot of the signs that things were going wrong were probably ignored. I think, the season that they reached the Champions League final, apart from the odd Champions League game, they were pretty poor for most of that season. Certainly after Christmas, signs that squad were very, very tired. There was so little investment over the last 2 or 3 years. Massive over-reliance over 4 or 5 attacking players. If that, they look tired, and yes. It's true, and we're seeing with we may well see with Liverpool, and that's the question mark, isn't it? If you don't bring players in for long enough, how long do those players keep that kind of standard up?
Definitely.
Someone like Dele Alli looks like 20% of the player he looked sort of 4 years ago, and that's really worrying.
Yeah, and also you'd
imagine that. I mean, I would have wanted Pochettino at Man United. I think that would have been great to see. Could he?
It could still happen, couldn't it?
I absolutely could still happen. You'd still fancy that he would be the favourite should this Solskjaer experiment sort of come to an end. To give him the tools, which he hasn't had before, the tools to actually win things will be, because that's the test, isn't it? It's a lot of this is hypothesis, isn't it? Until he actually produces something.
Oh yeah, it's all hypothesis, all of it. Of course it is, and it means we've got something to talk about. Right, number 1, heading your top 10 list this week is Allegri.
It is, and maybe some people would put Poch above him on the grounds that the football's more exciting. But I'm a sucker for 5 Serie A titles in a row, and I think you might laugh and say, "Oh, we could do that. It's a piece of piss." But actually, 5 in a row, it's very no one does that for PSG. No one's done that for Man City. Bayern Munich's a push. It's very difficult to keep up that kind of. If we're talking about keeping up. Not getting complacent. We talk all the time about it's so difficult to retain titles. You do that 5 times in a row. That's pretty bloody impressive.
Which, like you just said a minute ago about Pochettino and keeping that group of players interested and motivated. And it's easier if you're winning things, but it's still not easy to keep them going year after year. I mean, I look at Celtic going for 10 in a row, and that is a 1-team division, but it's still a feat to get a group of players bothered, to get them caring about it at all. And so absolutely, it's impressive for Allegri to do that in a league that is still at times competitive and it's getting more so. It's still definitely a feat, and I'd love to see him in this league. Do you think his style of football would suit the Premier League?
I think so, because he's not a flash manager. There is a little bit of a pragmatism about him, and he loves a well-drilled defence and organised midfield, and then change things around up top according to who you're playing, which sounds like a proper manager to me. I mean, I don't know, call me crazy. Yeah. So he probably would fit into most clubs. Now, I do wonder, because he's obviously been out of work for over a year. I don't know whether there is some sort of reluctance from elsewhere to think that his style wouldn't work outside of Italy. Because obviously that's the big test, isn't it? Does it work outside of a division which is naturally more pragmatic or naturally more defensive? But I think a great fit for Man United. I think, to have that kind of, I think mind you, I don't know whether Man United fans would think he was another Mourinho, or I think he was another sort of,
or even a Conte,
more dour style manager.
Yeah. I think what United like with Solskjaer is the fact that he sort of wheel out this phrase a lot, but he sort of understands the club, right? He just wants to play attacking football, and that's what the fans generally want. And I'm not sure they would want to go back to someone who didn't have that as their core belief. Anyway, Sarah, that's all we've got time for this week. Thank you for being here for our topical top 10s. We'll be back next week. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can email us. It's the editor at football365.com. Until next week, goodbye.